Okay. So it says, I do not have enough information on these events to make an opinion on it, but I will look into it. Okay. I definitely appreciate your honesty, Kiara. And you know what? That brings up a, valid point. In Monday's class, when we took time to read the sample argument by Malcolm X, the speech Malcolm X talks to young people, the main point in that text was, research, right? See for yourself, learn for yourself so you can judge for yourself, right? So in order to really engage in debate, we have to be informed debaters. You have to be an informed arguer. If not, it definitely impacts your credibility. So it impacts your ability to persuade or convince, which is that main purpose. So I do like your honesty about that, but you've also pointed out or shed light on, before we can really engage in argument, we need to be informed. We need to kind of make sure that first step of research is taking place. So we're going to talk more about research a little bit today. All right, Benito says, I think them taking a stand really did change things. You said because it shows that no one is just going to sit by and do nothing. Absolutely, Benito. I think that the sentiment from the protests, which took place last week, was that, kind of like what I believe it was the tweet that LeBron James had put off, he said he's sick of it, enough is enough. So the change or effective change that we could be noticing is just that it will not go unnoticed, right? The kind of sweeping it under the rug or ignoring those social issues just will not happen anymore. And that in itself is a change, right? So I like that you identified where you stand on that issue, and then you also included that rationale, that reasoning as to why you feel the way you do. All right, so Alejandra pointed out, I think the NBA protests were effective. You say that their voices were definitely heard, and it did not include violence. So I think it was very effective. Good, I like that point you made there. The fact, first of all, you clearly are taking a stand. You agree that it was effective. You feel like the voices were definitely heard, and you also added your individual, kind of showing what you value as audience member. You like that it wasn't, a violent protest, right? That it was peaceful. All right, Leslie, you went on to say that I think that having a very influential league like the NBA does make a difference because they have the power to use their platforms to make a change for the better. I like this entire response. You packed quite a bit into it. So first of all, we know that you agree. So your stand or your claim is that the protests were effective, and you specifically pointed to the NBA's influence. So it's effective because of the influence worldwide, right, international, that the NBA has. So I like that. And you also brought in how using that influence is an important factor of change, like that. All right, so Sion. Look, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you said it right.
All right, awesome. All right, so Sion goes on to say, I think it made a change because the most effective way to make society understand is through money. And the NBA protests showed that they were willing to cost themselves money to bring about change. Ooh, I like this, Sion. It speaks to the sacrifice made. So you feel that the protests were effective. I can clearly see your position, and you lay out it was effective because society, with this being a capitalistic society understands the language of money, right? So we saw how the league itself, the NBA, the entire league, I believe his name is Adam Silver, the commissioner, how he came out in support of the protest, because yes, he did notice that the players had, a level of power in terms of, that access, right? The coverage, and also the NBA's ability to make money, right? So anytime you are dealing with dollars, you definitely can affect change. All right, I like that. Caesar goes on to say, I think taking a stance on the issue is definitely effective because you can see the players were willing to risk the playoffs for a good cause. So good, Caesar. You also point to that sacrifice that was made. That gives this movement credibility, right? We see, just as citizens, right? Just as citizens out here, we see that they were really willing to put themselves on the line. So when you see that a sports figure or celebrity figure or activist, when we see them putting themselves on the line, it tends to establish their credibility, but it also tends to establish the cause, right? So it added some credibility to that cause. It showed how important it was. So I do agree with you on that, Caesar, that it was effective. Jorge pointed out that you think it demonstrated a united front. So yes, you think it's effective. And the reason why is they protested as a group. I definitely agree with that. But not only that, Jorge, did you notice that not only did the NBA, certain teams, I believe as a whole, but it also extended to MLB, NHL, the Hockey League. We even saw the commentators, Kenny Smith, um, what is the guy's name? Chris Webber, Jamel Hill, right? These analysts, we saw them also, getting in on the protest. So some commentators, some coaches, um, with them presenting that united front, it definitely helped to solidify that cause. So I definitely agree with that. All right. So for the most part, I see you guys agreeing, yes. Um, I see Alex goes on to say, I think they were effective in showing the hypocritical way Black people are treated when choosing how to protest. Ooh, I like that. You go on to say that they don't want you to protest in the streets, but when it's a peaceful thing like this, you're supposed to shut up and dribble. Ooh, and I like how you have that in quotes. You are making an allusion to, so you are directly addressing the Laura Ingraham comment that she made about LeBron James, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, when he kind of started making a stance, using his platform to make a political stance. And she, um, spoke up saying he should just shut up and dribble, right? Um, so I'm glad you tied that in. But yes, you said that you think it was effective, but you think it was effective in showing the hypocrisy in how, we'll say, the media or society, how sometimes there is some hypocrisy with how we look at protests. I definitely agree with you there. So, and it was also effective because it showed that this type of peaceful protest, it is, it was effective. It definitely was. Faith goes on to say, I feel like it should have been more progressive. It was effective, but it really needs a boost for our voices to be heard. Um, I'm glad you introduced this perspective, Faith, because it would seem, just based on this check-in question, it may seem like we all agree. But this is actually a controversial topic that some people do not feel that protest in itself is effective in bringing about change. So there are, um, an audience who disagrees with this particular, question, with this issue. Is protest effective? You also have some who agree, but so you present the perspective, Faith, that you agree, but you feel like it should have been more progressive. So you feel like it needs to be more, right? And let's say, for instance, you were presenting this in argument, you would then present what that more would be or what it should be. Your argument could be, here's how our protests could be more effective, right? So you would kind of lay out your reasoning for that. But I do like that perspective. You feel like it was effective, but it definitely, there's more work that needs to be done. And I definitely agree with you there. So let's see. So I see Jariah says, I think the protests are effective because most people are influenced by NBA players. So again, we're talking about this influence, right? Them using their platform. and you say, and if they're standing up about an issue, then people are most likely to listen. Absolutely. We know that. So, again, it is the star power that gives them a level of credibility. And then when you look at the stars, the NBA players who were behind it, whether you're looking at, because I believe it was the Milwaukee Bucks who at first decided that they were going to not play in the playoff game, and then from there it kind of spread. But a lot of the voices who have been speaking up on this, they aren't new voices. We have heard from them before. We've seen their efforts. So it's not just the star power. It's track record. It is, kind of them carving themselves as this dual image. I'm NBA star / activist, right? So definitely their influence and platform. Julia, you said you don't really think it did. So we'll talk more about that. I won't probe you for reasons, but kind of consider reasons why you don't really think that it did, right? As we kind of learn more and engage in argument a little bit more, I'll normally always ask you guys the question, do you agree or disagree, with this author's position? Maybe we're reading a argument article and I'll ask, do you agree or disagree with the author's point of view? So, this process, what I kind of prompted in you guys with this check-in question is what we will do a lot in writing our own essays, our response papers. You guys will be responding to arguments. So you want to, if you agree or if you disagree, you definitely want to include the reasons why you do. All right, so let's see, what else did I miss? Ricardo, you pointed out, yes, I think they're effective because many people in the NBA are role models, and it's a sport many people watch. So it will bring much attention to an issue. So again, it's effective because of the attention that is garnering. Good, I agree. Kiara, you said, oh, that's okay. That's okay. That's something you send me private, so we'll talk about that. But okay, so you guys are just getting a glimpse. Try to, if you can, stay abreast of current events. Oftentimes, I'll come to class looking at what's going on in the world around us, and I'll ask your take on it. I'll ask you guys, what do you think? So the NBA protest, it was slightly short-lived. I think they agreed that they would, go ahead and play. So you may have missed it, especially if you're not, really an avid sports fan. But it garnered a lot of attention. I know whether I was turning on my radio, whether I was flicking through the channel, I saw someone referring to or talking about these NBA protests. So we'll talk more about that in just a second. But good, thank you guys. Good comments, good feedback. I'll sometimes do a little bit of this every day to kind of get us practice with responding, right? Responding with position. All right, let me go ahead and stop this share because there is something I wanted to talk to you guys about. One thing first to keep in mind, next Monday, so Monday is Labor Day. So I want you guys to be mindful that we will not have class on Monday. September 8th is Labor Day. Is it the 8th? Look, sorry, you guys. I'm looking at my calendar. I guess I don't need to. The 7th. So September 7th, that's Monday. That is Labor Day. We do not have class. So next week will be a one-day week for us. We will only meet on Wednesday. So I wanted to give you guys a quick heads up about what this will look like on Brightspace and what it will look like in terms of the work that needs to be completed in the module. So let me take us to our Brightspace page really quickly before I get into today's discussion. Because I have added some things, well, something that I want you guys to make note of. So when we last saw each other on Monday, you guys know that the files that are in Module 2, they're mainly reading. So they're mainly either presentations. I think there's a YouTube video. a PowerPoint, and the rest are documents. Same process. We're still utilizing the same process. You would read that information, you know, throughout the week. But I did add an assignment, so that's what I want to show you guys. Share. All right, so let me go into our module 2. This is where you guys will find it. And I added this. You guys will see where my mouse is. I added an internet scavenger hunt. And this is really to flex our research muscles. So when we read the sample argument on Monday, that Malcolm X text, not only were we looking at a sample of argument in order to really analyze purpose and author's main point, but it was also to emphasize the importance of being informed, especially as an arguer. So I want us to talk a little bit about our research practices. You know, this will kind of let me see how you guys research. And I want to introduce what I call credible websites. That anytime we are looking at controversial issues in this class, I'll give you guys a list of sites where I think you should begin. Not so much Google, more so Google Scholar, but we'll talk about that in just a second. All right, so you guys see this here with this scavenger hunt being added for homework. So here's a quick heads up. Homework from Wednesday to Wednesday. So again, I will not see you guys after this class until next Wednesday. What you want to work on in preparation for next Wednesday's class is you guys definitely want to read what's here. But what isn't listed here is chapters 1 and 2 in our They Say, I Say textbook. So whether you guys have purchased your concrete text, you know, the printed text, or whether you are using the PDF version that I've attached to our Brightspace course page, you guys will be responsible for reading chapters 1 and chapter 2 of the They Say, I Say textbook. So I'm going to add this to Brightspace, but you know, because I couldn't link the entire, you know, those chapters individually, it's not added here, but that is something in preparation. Also, what you guys will be doing, we'll be completing this internet scavenger hunt. Okay, so 2 things. I'm not attempting to rain on your Labor Day holiday, but in between now and next Wednesday, when we meet again, students will want to have chapters 1 and 2 read in the text, and they will want to have the internet scavenger hunt completed. And we're going to look at this. You know, hold on, let me show you guys this scavenger hunt, just so you can kind of know what you're doing with this. So an internet scavenger hunt, again, if we're thinking about these ideas of see for yourself, learn for yourself so you can judge for yourself, if that is the mindset that we are entering debate with, you know, I want to look at how do we research? What's our process? What sites do we value? Do we just simply Google a particular research question? You know, do we jump on the first one that we see, or do we normally scrutinize what site does it come from? A lot of times before I use information that I gathered in my research, I will need to see it more than once, right? So I may spot it on one site. Well, let me see if, you know, I'll click on another site, you know, just to make sure that this information is confirmed. So if I can see it in more than one site, then I know that this is credible information. But I want to see how you guys specifically research. So this handout, which they're not letting me, oh, it's still loading. Look, that's okay. I have it in a Word document, so let me pull it up this way. All right. So can you guys see on the screen the handout for the internet research scavenger hunt?
No.
Oh, you guys don't.
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay, now we can.
Okay, you see it? Okay, good. So this handout is really kind of filled with what I may call random questions, because I want you to be looking for different things on the internet, but I try not to go, make it too difficult. I think it's about 8 questions, but if you guys look at the first question, who painted the Mona Lisa and where is it currently housed? So what museum currently first of all, who painted the Mona Lisa and what museum is it, currently housed in? So you guys would, not Google that. You guys will research it using the method that you normally use to research. You will write the answer here, and you will also make note of your source. So copy and paste the link here. So I want to see, where did you go to find this information? Beyond, is this information correct? Okay. Just saw something in chat. See you, Alejandra. Not so much, but I'll try to give you a note back in chat. All right. So you guys see the questions they're asking here. Find out what the high and low temperature will be for tomorrow. And that tomorrow could be whenever you start this. If you started on Saturday, then what will be the high and low temperature for Sunday? So it'll depend on when you start this actual assignment, what this answer will be. But again, you write your answer and you also include source. So several things I'm doing with this. We're getting some research practice, as well as I'm assessing what research skills we have. But you guys are also getting practice of keeping track of your sources. Anytime you research and you use that information, even to inform your position, but definitely if you use that information to support your argument, if you use it as evidence, you want to always cite your source. So we want to get a little bit of practice with that. So you guys see here another question: who was the 16th president of the United States? So somewhat simple questions, but some of them, there are discrepancies online. Here I get a little bit more in your business. Who is your local alderman? What ward? So this will require research if you do not already know. Even if you do, still kind of, play the game with me, include where you found that information. Who is the current Malcolm X College president? So these types of things. For number 8, in what year did Martin Luther King Jr. earn his BA in sociology, and from what school? So these are things really specific. So this is why it's an internet research scavenger hunt. But again, the goal is, let me see how we research. How are our research skills? Because argument depends on you being informed, using up-to-date current information found on current credible research sites. Okay. So did you guys have any questions about that? I'm kind of giving you homework for the weekend first, but I want to kind of take time to show you where to find it before I get started with the presentation. Okay, so seems easy enough. You guys know 2 assignments: reading chapter 1 and 2, completing the research scavenger hunt, on top of making sure you complete the reading for the module. So, okay,
I have
good.
a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So do we just email the scavenger hunt again?
That's a very good question. I'm actually going to set up an assignment in Brightspace for you guys to upload it, so that it's kind of easily being counted in terms of the grade. So I'll attach it to your grade book. When you submit it, I can kind of easily capture it. So you guys will be submitting this on Brightspace through assignments. So I'm setting that up. I may not find it now, but I will be setting it up. So that's a good question. And what you guys can do in posting this Microsoft document, when you guys, download it for yourself, if you click enable editing, you can use this document to type your responses. So, I think this should be easy for you guys to go in, find the answers, through your research. You could copy and paste the, URL link. And from there, that should be pretty easy for you guys to do. Once you have typed in your information, save it as, let's say, Kiara Scavenger Hunt, And then from there, you guys will upload it to Brightspace. So I'll give you specific information on that. Okay. All right, my people, I'll leave that alone for now. All right, so let me go ahead and get into the business, what we are covering today. Again, we're diving a little bit deeper into this idea of argument. Let me stop share. So again, hold on. I'm going back to Brightspace because I felt like Monday's class, towards the end of class, I felt like I kind of rushed through our discussion on, the Malcolm X speech, Malcolm X talks to young people. So what I did in announcements is I tried to recap. So if you missed it, if you feel it ended abruptly, here's kind of the takeaway that I want to pick up with on you guys today. Pick up where we left off today. So you guys know on Monday, we used those critical reading skills we discussed last week for you guys to analyze argument. So again, that Malcolm X speech was an example of argument. We looked at several things. The author, so we're looking at context. When was it written? How credible is the author? What from the author's background or expertise makes them credible? We also looked at things such as what is the author's main point or claim? And anytime we are dealing with argument, we're looking for their claim or proposition. And those are just synonyms for main idea, thesis, okay? So we look first for what is their debate, what is their argument, which is their claim. And then from there, we looked at how the author, Malcolm X, supported that claim with evidence, research, logic, personal experience. That's what he really used. So I attempted to introduce you guys early on to the components of argument as we saw it in that text, okay? So again, we saw the claim that everyone should read for himself, think for himself, learn for himself so he can judge for himself. That was that main idea. And then we looked at the examples and evidence of how that author supported that. So it says here, anytime you are considering argument, we are looking at how the author proves his or her point. So it's not just an informative writing. You are working actively to persuade and convince your audience to adopt your point of view. So that takes not only persuasion, but it will take proof, right? So with those things in mind, I want you guys to consider whether or not the examples or details used in that text, whether they were useful and relevant to, proving Malcolm X's claim. As audience members, did you feel that you were persuaded or convinced by that claim, right? That young people should see for themselves, listen for themselves, and think for themselves. So argument is a little bit more complex, I think, than we've previously considered. So let me pull up the presentation that we're going to cover today. And you guys were asked just to kind of peek at it, take a look, in order to review, but we're going to get a little bit more into it. So let me download it. Give me one moment. Now, this is a presentation that I use for students in class. So some of the language may, I may have to address it for a remote learning course, but we'll talk about that as it comes up. As you guys are going through the presentation, jot down any notes that you may have. But I do consider this one of the most important presentations in that it really lays out what's required for argument to be successful, under what conditions argument tends to fail, and what you will need in order to be an effective arguer yourself, okay? So while this is loading, let me just ask you guys the question. When you hear the word argument, I think I may have asked you guys this before, what immediately comes to mind? When you think of argument, what are some preconceptions we have?
Topic,
I'm sorry, say it again.
the topic of the argument. What
The
is it all
topic,
about?
okay, so you're thinking of when you're arguing a specific topic, right? Okay, I see that.
When you I guess when you arguing, you got to take a stance, like you can't be for something, but then also against it in the same
Right.
sense.
I like that, Dontrell, because sometimes we may be introduced to topics and we may genuinely feel like, well, I agree with both sides. But anytime you agree with both sides, you fail to have argument. So what makes an argument is that someone must be willing to agree or willing to disagree with you. Okay, so you don't want to play both sides. In writing your own argument, you must take a stand. You must take a position. And for someone who's indecisive, look, me, sometimes that can be a little bit difficult. So we'll get a little bit more help with that. But I see Leslie say trying to get others to agree with you. Okay, good. Kiara says perspectives of different individuals on an issue. Okay, I see you. These are nice, official, politically correct answers for, what argument is. Jorge says, given your perspective.
Emotion, because if you argue something, you have to believe in it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up emotion, Benito, because prior to the academic version of argument and debate, I would have defined argument as, let's say, how in some cases I've seen it, right? Whether that is emotion filled, screaming, yelling, right? When so we're thinking about what we know about argument already. This particular class is refining how we think about argument and how we approach it. So Caesar says your stance on a topic, good. I like that you say that, giving your perspective, your opinion, proving a point, debate. Okay, good. This, your perspective, your opinion, your stance, that is your ability to make a claim. So again, one of the most important components of arguments. I'm glad you guys noticed that. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this presentation. I'll share my screen in just a second. It gets a little bit difficult when I'm trying to do Zoom with this, but I'm gonna do my best. All right, so again, the presentation, what is argument? One of the most important things to know before you undertake any task is, what is the purpose of this, right? Why, do we argue, and what are we attempting to do when we argue, right? So we want to first always begin with a place of purpose. What are we trying to do when we argue? Yes, we're attempting to prove our point, but a formal definition would be the goal of argument is to bring about a change in an audience's initial position on a controversial issue. So argument, the way that it is taught in this class and presented in this class, is it's your ability to persuade or convince your audience to change their position on a controversial issue. So that, quick blurb or definition of what is argument, that tells a lot about what you will be doing. You are not writing argument for people who already agree with you. It is an argument if the person already agrees with you. You're writing argument for the person who disagrees with you. Your goal in laying out your stance or your opinion or your position on an issue is to provide the logic, explanation, and evidence to change their minds. You are working to persuade and convince them to adopt your point of view. So argument, as we approach it in this class, the goal is to change your audience's mind, their initial position on a controversial issue. Okay, again, we are not writing for an assumed audience who will agree with everything we say. We are writing for an audience who has to be persuaded or convinced to see things our way. Okay. So that makes argument a little bit more intentional, right? I have to make sure I am including compelling evidence if I'm attempting to change your mind, right? So let's look at the various types of argument. So here we talk about traditional argument. Anytime we are looking at traditional argument, we're looking at an arguer who's presenting a claim along with reasons and evidence to convince an audience to agree with them, okay? This class is predicated on the traditional argument. So at its foundation, argument equals claim plus support. Look, this is for my mathematically inclined people. Formula. So if we're looking at it like, well, what goes into an argument? An argument is a claim. So that is, again, your position, your stance, your, opinion on a controversial issue, but it's also how you prove that. So what support, evidence, and reasoning has been added to persuade or convince. So when we look at argument, it's not just the position, it's also how you attempt to use evidence in order to persuade and convince. So claim plus support, you guys will hear me say this often, equals argument. When I read your arguments, I'm looking for two things specifically. First of all, what is the student's claim? And how did the student support or prove that claim? That is always, I'll say, the argument recipe for this class. Claim, a stance, along with evidence in order to persuade and convince. All right. Another type of argument is consensual argument. Consensual argument is this idea that arguers create the possibility of agreement by acknowledging different points of view. So consensual argument is, closely related to its name. It's reaching a consensus. So consensual argument emphasizes agreement, whereas traditional argument emphasizes winning. So let me bring this back down here to the bottom. Because this class is predicated on traditional argument, the arguments you guys will write in this class, we are emphasizing you winning over the audience to your side. This isn't us working just to get them to see our point. We're working to change your mind. So it's this process of winning over the audience. So look at consensual argument as emphasizing agreement, reaching a consensus, whereas traditional argument emphasizes winning, right? My argument was so compelling that I won you over to my side, okay? Okay, hold on. All right. So because we know that this class is predicated on traditional argument, let's talk about a few examples of traditional argument that you guys may be familiar with. One of the most closely related forms of traditional argument is public debate. So with this being an election year, we haven't seen much public debates, but usually, public debates is a forum that allows candidates, public office officials, that allows them to argue to convince their audience to side with them. So again, it's still this idea that I'm looking to go win, like win over voters. Again, this idea of traditional argument, laying out your case so that you can win your audience over to your side. That is a form of what the purpose of public debate. Another example of traditional argument is courtroom argument. And if you watch any of the court shows, do we watch any of the court shows, you guys? Look, is that old school?
I still watch them every now and then.
Okay.
I watched some.
Okay, some.
The
They
People's Court.
recently canceled, well, not canceled, she resigned, so she reached the end of her tenure. But one of my favorite courtroom shows, and this is like not so much TV shows. I see you, Sion, Judge Mathis, right? I was going to say, you know, I like Judge Mathis and what's her name? Judge Judy. Look, I know my husband, he cannot stand Judge Judy, but I like Judge Judy because as an arbiter of traditional argument, Judge Judy is really a stickler for what's your claim. So what is your position? And she really is a stickler for where's your evidence. So when we think of these examples of, you know, traditional argument, it again establishes this idea of claim, what is your position, and what evidence did you provide in order to persuade or convince. So we see that a lot with courtroom argument. Lawyers present their claims or their cases to a jury. They present evidence in order to win over that jury to their side, right? Another example of traditional argument is the single perspective argument. And we see this in articles, in written argument. So where the author cannot necessarily, you know, debate in real time with their audience, they do present a single perspective on that issue with that same goal of persuading or convincing a mass audience, right? So we read the Malcolm X Talks to Young People speech. But even though we weren't there, you know, in real time when it was given in New York in 1964, even as readers now, that text operates as a single perspective argument. So again, he lays out his perspective on an issue. He gives the evidence or explanation, again, with the goal of winning the audience over. And we saw a lot of that in the, you know, Malcolm X text. He was directly addressing his audience. So he was very mindful that I am attempting to win you over. He used a lot of language like we and us and our. And in doing that, he was establishing common ground. He was establishing that we have similar value systems. And that's an effective argument tool in winning over an audience. Another example of traditional argument are those one-on-one everyday arguments that we engage in, right? So it says examples may be a salesperson who wants to sell a customer a car, or a student who writes a letter to convince a professor to accept a late paper, right? We engage in these everyday one-on-one arguments, whether, what's a recent one-on-one argument I've had around here? The argument about my kids staying up late, okay? So, you know, I am attempting to lay out to them the reasons why it's not in your best interest to stay up till, you know, X, Y, and Z in the morning, right? So this is just, you know, just every day, you know, depending on what's going on in my life, these are just those everyday arguments, right? Sometimes I'll even have arguments within myself, right? Like, should I stop and get gas before I go to work, or should I, you know, get it before, you know, on my way home? So we engage in these everyday arguments. So these are a few examples of traditional argument, which again, is the foundation on which this class is based. Claim plus support equals argument, okay? Uh-oh. All right, so we talked about consensual argument. We know the purpose of consensual argument is to get our audience to agree with us. So some examples of consensual argument is what I call the dialectic debate. So that's when two or more people participate as equals in a dialogue or a discussion to come up with what is the best position on an issue. So a lot of times when students do group work, the goal sometimes is for them to work as a group to come up with the best solution or the best response. That's consensual. That's people talking out their issues to come to a common common ground or consensus. So we have that dialectic debate. We also have academic inquiry. So when you ask a question to, you know, in class, maybe about something that you read, maybe about something that that instructor says, you are engaging in academic inquiry. You may want that teacher or, you know, that particular person to provide a little bit more evidence, provide a little bit more information in order for you to, you know, gain these new truths about complex issues. So academic inquiry is a form of consensual argument. We know the more familiar kind of negotiation and mediation. So specifically in the court system, when couples are, you know, deciding to dissolve a marriage, right? Argument a lot of times is dealt with through consensus, right? We know we can't make both people happy, you know, like we know in this case one person cannot win, but we are attempting to come up with an agreement, something that works for everybody. So that negotiation and mediation, we've seen that it's used to reach an understanding or an agreement in order to solve a problem. And lastly, internal argument. I think I used internal argument for the traditional argument, but internal argument is the argument that we have with ourselves anytime we experience internal conflict. So whether we know we have a paper due and we are, you know, debating whether we should do it now or, you know, do it later. These are those internal arguments that we engage in all the time, right? Should I read the, you know, chapters 1 and 2 now, or should I do that later? So again, with internal arguments, it isn't so much to win, but it is to increase motivation to help us make a decision or to solve a problem. So hopefully what you guys are seeing are the differences between traditional argument, which emphasizes winning an audience member over to your side through the use of evidence. And we also learned about consensual argument, which is more so about reaching an agreement, right? So agreement versus winning. That's what we're looking at here. All right, so since we know in this class we are engaging in traditional argument, here are a few things I want you guys to keep in mind. So if you're jotting down any notes, or if you guys are just kind of making note of the presentation, make note somewhere of the components or the factors that show when argument works best, because you guys will see this information again when we have our, I believe it's week 4 quiz. I'll be asking you guys, you know, questions. What's the purpose of argument? I may ask you questions, you know, what is traditional argument? What's the equation that we use to define argument, right? That's that claim plus support. So this particular presentation, you will see this information again. And one of the most important, you know, one of the most important slides in this presentation is this one, where we're looking at under what condition does argument work best. If I'm going to expect you guys to write your own arguments, it's important for you to know what will increase my chances of being successful with this. First thing is, anytime you argue, it must be a controversial issue. You will see that when you try to argue something that isn't necessarily controversial, a lot of times you won't really have anywhere to go in your debate, right? So let's think of an example of that. Would you guys say that, let me think, smoking causes cancer, okay? And I mean smoking cigarettes. Look, let me be specific. Smoking cigarettes causes cancer, right? Would you guys consider that a controversial issue? One on which you could engage in debate?
Not anymore, but I know it used to be one.
Yeah, it did used to be one, right? Let me see, what do I have here? I see yes and I see a no. So I like your answer. Hold on, let me see, I got one more. Yeah, so what I said was, if we're looking at issues, right, and knowing that an argument works best when it is rooted in a controversial issue, do you guys feel that if I were to make the claim that smoking causes cancer, is this a debatable controversial issue? So I see some people say yes, some people say no. But let me know what you think, Faith. Okay, I see. So you say yes. Sion says it depends. All right, because at this point, we are aware there's factual evidence and information that smoking cigarettes, whether that's nicotine, tobacco, it causes cancer. So someone who would say no is just someone who is informed. Like, it really does not create an argument. I think health officials, everyone has come to the conclusion that smoking, even secondhand smoke, causes cancer. So that is what I would call, that is not a controversial issue. That isn't anything where I think people would necessarily disagree with you on, right? Controversial issue are issues that we, that could garner a disagreement. So one of the most used controversial issues I used to hear was, about the legalization of marijuana, right? But now with time, that debate in some cases is null and void too. In the city of Chicago, recreational marijuana, it is legalized. So now that controversial issue takes on a different debate, right? Now we could talk about, do we think the tax system is fair? Now we can talk about, is it fair that marijuana was legalized while, there are still people serving time, in jail for, the same laws that we are now using to, garner a profit. So now we can take that issue and address it to, reflect the times. But when it comes to smoking, does smoking cause cancer? That's a non-controversial issue. That's a fact. A controversial issue is normally an opinion. And it is normally when people use words like should. A lot of times that shows up when we're addressing a controversial issue, right? Should students go back to face-to-face, or should they, continue with remote learning? That's a controversial issue. You'll find people who will agree or who will disagree with that particular statement, right? In asking if protests are effective, that is a controversial issue. There are people who may agree yes, or people who may disagree no, right? When we look at, things such as, is social media, look, I could freestyle, don't let me. We'll come back to this point on issues towards the end. But another factor that argument needs in order to work best is an arguer. There has to be someone willing to take on that issue, right? Someone willing to give that issue a voice. So in order for argument to work best, there has to be a controversial issue in which an arguer is willing to take on. Argument also tends to work best when there is an audience, because the entire goal of argument depends on us persuading or convincing an audience. What will determine whether or not you win, whether or not your argument was successful or not, will be the audience reception, right? So I know you guys are thinking, well, Ms. Cole, if we're writing papers, how will I know if the audience agrees or disagrees with me? But we will always want to write with an audience in mind. So we're looking at if, this was going to a mass audience, right? First of all, who is my audience, and what would I need to include in order to persuade and convince? So audience is major in terms of having successful argument. Is there anyone here who, what can I call it? Maybe we're in debate in high school, or have taken a speech class in the past? Do we have experience with debate or speech?
I did.
I hear I did.
I did.
I did too.
Okay, good. So if you guys have taken speech before, or if you have engaged in debate, whether it was a debate class or club in high school, you will see that a lot of what we're talking about here, this is familiar to you. One of the most important tools in debate is the audience. They are the ones who determine who won or who lost. So audience, again, very important. Again, for argument to work best, you want to have common ground. It is futile. It's a futile attempt to persuade or convince an audience who you guys are on two very different pages. So before I can kind of win someone over to my side, I have to be able to relate to them. There has to be some level of common ground. So as an arguer, in being aware of an audience, we need to also be aware of establishing common ground. I have to establish a bridge if I want them to cross over to my side. And common ground is that bridge. So I'm just thinking about a little bit about argument. Let me give an example of this. If you guys knew me personality-wise, right? Oh, I love debate. I absolutely love it. And I kind of think the teacher in me, just likes to see how people support or develop, their claims. But one type of debate I've been having trouble with, or one issue I say I've been having trouble with, is that controversial issue of, is it all lives matter or is it Black Lives Matter, right? You guys have seen that controversial issue kind of floating around out there. This is what I call a controversial issue, but I'm very cautious about who I engage on this issue, because the person has to be willing, first of all, to, look at it a different way. And that's whether you are for all lives matter or Black Lives Matter or whatever. There still has to be a willingness to look at it a different way. So that's that common ground, and a lot of times in that debate, what I found is the person, no matter how compelling the argument may be, that, there's a reason why they specifically say Black Lives Matter instead of all lives matter. So if I'm arguing that particular claim, I've learned not to argue with some people who I think sometimes they're not even attempting to, they're not even willing to accept it. So it's almost a lost cause if that audience is not willing, if they see no way to kind of relate to it. So again, lack of common ground, it can really sabotage an argument. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So an issue, controversial issue is needed. An arguer, someone brave and willing to take on that issue. Audience is important because they establish whether or not you've won, right? Whether or not they've been convinced or persuaded. Common ground, we need to have some values in common. We have to have some bridge, some common ground, in order for me to even be able to persuade or convince. And lastly, you need a forum. So whether you are engaging in debate in class, that's a forum. Whether you are engaging in debate on the internet, whether it's on social media or whatever, that's your forum. But there always has to be a forum for argument, whether you're writing on a blog, whether you are writing an article. So maybe the forum is your publication, but all 5 of these components are necessary for argument to work best, okay? And the reason too, just the last thought about forum, the reason too why I point this out is sometimes there's a time and a place for argument. It doesn't always work best under any circumstance. It has to be the right circumstance. So, I just think about times in the past where I may have been in, let's say, whether it's, in church or at a sporting event or family event, and that may be the time that my, let's say, significant other may want to, let's say, talk about bills or debate about something. Well, this isn't the time or place, right? So argument doesn't work well if it's not in its proper forum, okay? So we consider that as well. All right, let me see, got a couple minutes. So now that we've looked at the conditions under which argument works best, I want you guys to also consider the conditions under which argument tends to fail, because this is what we want to work to avoid. We do not want to engage in a, again, what I call a non-controversial issue. There has to be some disagreement. So argument fails when there is no disagreement or no reason to argue. So you want to make sure when you guys are responding to a debate or selecting a controversial issue to argue about, that it is truly controversial, in that there could be an audience that will disagree with this, okay? Argument tends to fail also when it is risky or trivial issues. So I just kind of brought up the issue of the All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, right? For me personally, that's one that tends to get a bit trivial for me, because some of the people I think who debate that, I think what we're talking, what people are talking about when they say it. Sometimes you're attempting to be an agitator, right? So sometimes that's a trivial issue. But I've also seen argument go very wrong with risky issues. So when it comes to the debate on abortion, which is a very old debate, but the reason that I think it stays consistent is that it is rooted in some cases in religious belief. So when you're looking at religion or a strong belief system, sometimes it's really difficult to persuade or convince someone to change their religious affiliations, right? So I don't even engage in those particular arguments when we're looking at things like religion, because those are things that aren't easily persuaded, where I could easily persuade someone to adopt my point of view, right? It's somewhat of a setup. So I try to stay away from, anything to do with religion. So you guys will see that. I try to also stay away from politics, but not so much political issues. I tend to stay away from, discussion of politics in terms of Republican or Democrat. That's also a, ideology that is a little bit more difficult to persuade or convince someone against. So I consider that risky. You may lose your audience when you kind of venture into those issues. So you don't want to get into risky or trivial issues that could get in the way of you persuading or convincing your audience. Argument tends to fail when there is difficulty in establishing common ground. Again, if the audience can't relate to you, you will not be able to persuade or convince them. So again, argument tends to fail when there is no common ground, no general principle or values that we share. And lastly, argument tends to fail when it results in a standoff or fight. Something has gone wrong in the argument or debate process if at the end of it, we want to, put paws on each other, right? So where we've talked about at the start of class, what is argument, and in some cases we identified as emotional. In this class, we attempt to stay away from, again, those really risky issues that could result in negative outcomes, okay? So I try to stay away, but with the time we have left, where am I? Okay, we got about 10 minutes. Let me kind of make my way through this. You guys do want to know this. When we argue, I am teaching you all how to argue ethically. So you want to know the difference between ethical and unethical argument. Everyone who's arguing aren't always doing it right? There sometimes is what I call argument malpractice. When you present misinformation, when you cite sources incorrectly, when you are not well informed, the argument tends to then venture into the realm of, now we're being unethical. I'm misleading my audience. And through that misinformation, I may be harming them, right? So in this class, I really want us to approach argument ethically. An ethical argument approaches issues in insightful, useful, and beneficial ways. So did you guys see how at the beginning of class, when you came in with that check-in question and you guys responded with either you agree or disagree, yes or no, but then you went further into adding your perspective or your insight. Ethical argument thrives from insight. Maybe you're looking at it or approaching it in a way that I've never considered it, right? That's, ethical, it benefits me to hear your argument. I'm learning something from your argument. So ethical argument, again, it approaches issues insightfully, you know, in a useful and beneficial way. So here's an example of an ethical argument. A plan for an effective, you know, an economical way to rebuild an area that has been destroyed by hurricanes, flood, or fire. So if we're arguing about, you know, an effective or the best way to rebuild an area, right? So I'm only offering arguments that will help, you know, that's beneficial. But we want to stay away from unethical arguments that seeks to manipulate an audience or even harm them, right? With the political climate that we're in right now, and especially as you guys are now students of argument, I want you to pay attention, really pay attention to how the various sides are arguing or addressing certain issues, how, you know, the candidates are, you know, addressing that. Is there this need to interject fear? Is there this need to provide misinformation or to fudge the numbers, right? That is an unethical arguer. That's a person who isn't necessarily attempting to persuade or convince you. It's more so looking to trick you into adopting their point of view. And that again is unethical. So as you guys are getting to research, you want to be ethical in how you deal with research too. You don't want to kind of cut some information, misrepresent the author's views or position. You know, so you don't want to manipulate an audience. You don't want to present information or misinformation that may harm them. So an example of an unethical argument is one I see often with the payday loan stores or any of those payday businesses where they present the claim that they are helping consumers, right? You know, if you need help paying your bills or you need help, you know, making it to the next paycheck, you know, come in and we'll help you take care of what you need to take care of. Well, they don't necessarily help. They give the illusion of help. But if you guys have ever dealt with payday loan stores before, if you just know anything about them, it's somewhat predatory lending services. They present this illusion of helping, but in signing on that dotted line, you in some cases, especially in Illinois, you may end up paying back like 300% of what you borrow, right? Because, you know, Illinois has laws where interest, like there can be no cap on interest. So the, you know, payday loan stores, they are anticipating that you don't know that. So they're manipulating, you know, their audience in a way that harms them. It's putting them into further debt. So I do think anytime I see those commercials about payday loans or those billboards, it's unethical. It's giving the illusion of helping when in real, you know, in reality, it harms more than it helps. So ethical argument, that is what I'm promoting in this class. Make sure you guys know the difference between the two. All right, my time. Okay, online argument. This is one that I'll attempt to close with. Online argument, ooh, that is the day and age that we are in. So where, especially in the age of COVID, where we used to kind of get together, even in class, we would have these, you know, I would have my students kind of group into, you know, certain, you know, what I call debate pockets. We don't even have that luxury in the age of COVID. So everything is online. And online argument is really changing the face of debate. But I want you guys to consider online argument when we talk about argument. Online argument gives you an opportunity, first of all, to come in contact with many different controversial issues. If I just watch my social media feed, you know, some mornings, sometimes in a way it operates almost as a news feed, right? So I'm getting all of this information. In the comments, you'll see how people will respond to that issue. Either they agree or they may disagree. So you guys have seen people kind of have their own side debates going on in comment sections, right? This is online argument. It's a forum, it's online, and it allows you to get real-time interaction, right? So they call it Twitter fingers, right? But yeah, online argument is alive and well, and I want you guys to use that and consider that as a platform to practice debate. It's really useful because online you get a volume, you get a larger variety of issues that you are exposed to. Online argument can easily be accessed. And again, you can join in the ongoing conversation. Also, online argument usually presents the most relevant, again, what I call current hot topics. So it's those issues that are important to us. So it gives us that opportunity to think a little bit more about it. And online arguments allows us to interact. So I'm just going to tell you guys my business. Online argument, oh, I go there. Look, I'm normally always lurking in the comments just to kind of see how people feel. If you agree, why do you feel the way you feel? If you disagree, so I look for that. It could be the teacher in me, but I also look for things to see how people are supporting their opinion, right? Are you ridiculing the person who disagrees with you? You guys have seen people who just want to point out your grammar or things like that. Some people who may not necessarily focus on the subject or issue may kind of change the subject, in real time during the argument. I've seen people present misinformation or wrong facts or information. So online argument is really interesting. And I think it also gives us good practice. It kind of strengthens our debate chops when we engage. So definitely do not underestimate online argument. And when you can engage, dive in and engage. I also call it research. It's my way of kind of collecting, what do I call it? Collecting ideas, right? If I'm writing with an audience in mind, then I want to know, how does the audience think, right? If there's people who may disagree with me, what is their points, right? Maybe I can address that in my own argument. So online argument is a great start to you guys viewing argument, engaging in argument. So lastly, before we go, conclusions, what I hope you guys are taking away. All arguments, whether it is traditional or consensual, it all revolves around a claim, engaging and influencing your audience. But traditional argument really focuses on proving your point, this whole idea of winning your audience over to your side. I want you guys to remember that all forms of productive argument includes the components claim, and again, synonymous with claim is your thesis, your proposition, right? That is your stance on the issue, as well as the evidence that you plan to lay out to persuade or convince your audience, okay? So you guys will definitely see this information again. Normally the first quiz we take of the semester, it really covers the what is argument presentation, as well as some information you guys will get out of chapter 1 and 2. So we'll talk more about that next week. All right, so did you guys have any questions before we go? Look, that hour and 20 minutes always goes so fast. But did you guys have any questions for me? Are we clear that we won't see each other Monday and that there's a new assignment in module 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Miss Cole, I have a question.
Sure.
Can a vague topic be given as an argumentative can a vague topic be given to write on as an argumentative essay?
You said, can a fake copy? I'm sorry, say that one more
Can
time.
a vague topic?
Oh, vague topic. Well, since this particular semester, we are focusing our arguments to really cover stigma in healthcare. So while we may talk about other issues that are going on around us, most of the argument that you guys will write for yourselves and write in response to are the arguments that really explore these topics of stigma in healthcare. So when we talk about that really quickly, one of the questions in the internet research scavenger hunt asks you guys to define stigma. But when we think about stigma in healthcare, we think about things such as the high mortality rate of, African American women in childbirth, right? How they tend to die in childbirth. Let's say, I think it's 7 times more than any other group. People of color in general, especially, Latinx women, they also, the infant mortality rate, their childbirth mortality rate is really high. And they look at that as being connected to or stigmatized by their race, right? In some cases, can that person afford proper health care? So there's also stigma in terms of social class. One of the earliest articles that we read is this one about stigma in mental health, right? So can mental health patients really get the proper care if the medical provider is approaching them as crazy or dangerous? So we look at these ideas of stigma and how it's impacting healthcare. So that's the main topic. Not main topic. That is the premise on which most of the controversial issues we'll talk about in this class will be. So unless you guys are doing discussion board, or unless we're kind of just doing group, pair, and share, primarily the issues will be, revolve around that stigma in healthcare. Okay. All right. Did you guys have any other questions? I took you about. Oh, I see. Sayan says, will we have any debates? Yes, we will. And those debates will normally come from those current event controversial topics. And that is just to give us practice, exercise in our debate chops, right? So we do. And Faith asks, is the homework just a scavenger hunt? It's the scavenger hunt is the actual assignment you guys will do, but all of the reading that's in module 2 is for the homework as well. So even though there may not be any assignment attached to it, you guys are still responsible for that information. So read the article on stigma. That should give you guys a good heads up as well. All right, good, awesome. Thank you guys for listening to me. Just a few weeks will it be more so me talking, but as we really get into argument, you guys will see it'll be a lot different. We'll be more engaged. So, all right, you guys, go ahead. You're dismissed. If you have any questions, email me, let me know. But other than that, I will see you all next Wednesday. So enjoy your Labor Day weekend. All right, see you, Christian. Thank you. I have a good one, Alejandra. See you, Janet. Have a good one.
I was going to say something real quick. I'm really sorry that I joined late. I was having trouble signing in.
You know what? I'm having a hard time hearing you, Janet. Can you? Oh, let me turn my volume up. I see it's a little low here. Can you say that one more time for me?
Yeah, I was saying that I'm really sorry that I joined the class late. I was having trouble for some reason signing into my account.
Oh, yeah, that's okay, Janet. Don't worry. I think you sent me an email that you were kind of having trouble. Did you send me something too? I thought I saw something.
No, I sent you something on the chat, but I don't think you saw it. It's like all the way at the top.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, don't worry. That's okay.
Okay.
That's okay. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, no problem. Bye.
Bye. Have a good one.
You too.